another part about marijuana.
What's that?
It can lead you to more exciting, harder drugs to come.
What are harder drugs?
Oh, you'll find out, my dear.
Drugs. They've been around for as long as we have. Any substance that enters the body and has a physiological effect is classified as one. Humans have had a long history with plants and alcohol, but that's not where my telling of this story begins. The first example of a substance being isolated from the original source is morphine. It's the principal psychoactive alkaloid of opium. The German pioneer Friedrich Serturner worked on its isolation around 1804. The significance of his discovery would go unnoticed for another 12 years. Heinrich Emanuel Merck, the founder of the pharmaceutical dynasty, in 1827 would begin to manufacture this new substance at large scale. Friedrich was a multi-talented but erratic man who may have become addicted to his own discovery. He faded into obscurity after his death in 1841. It wouldn't be until World War I that his contributions would be recognized. The first synthetic drug was chloral hydrate, a sedative. It was discovered in 1832 by Justus von Liebig. Because of its relatively easy procurement, it would be quickly manufactured and distributed. It would be adopted quickly into asylums and general medical practice. By the end of the century, it was a popular drug for recreational purposes. Drug synthesis would also begin to move much faster in civilization in many aspects. By 1900, many commonly abused drugs today would be synthesized, including benzocaine, amphetamines, and methamphetamines. Soon the government would begin to regulate and tax the importation of opium or coca leaves into the country in 1914 with the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act. In 1919, a lawsuit was filed, Webb et al. Versus the United States, which declared his physician would be not allowed to provide him with his regular fix of morphine. It was the first ever court case to document it as a habit and that he required it to remain comfortable. It very much understated the threat of addiction and physical withdrawals. The public was not so easily convinced, and at the time we were on a rampage against these substances. The prohibition would begin the following year. Prohibition caused the government to lose a large portion of its income, which is when they began directly taxing incomes. The will of the American public would be tested, and underground clubs would emerge with the arrival of organized crime. The Great Depression began in 1929, and only 4 years later, America would repeal prohibition. Europe was the pioneer of medicines in the 1700s. Intellectual property in the field of medicine originally was non-patentable, meaning the drugs could be mass-produced by anyone. This changed in 1791 in a historic upset of the peasants versus the monarchy of France. Patents started being granted liberally, considering an inventor's right to be a natural one. In 1844, this was overturned by the Assembly at the time. For almost 100 years, the idea was considered taboo to hoard information that could be critical to people's health. The US being the exception to this. After World War II, this would change all over Europe as every country established procedures for patenting drugs. America would continue wrestling with the idea of drugs being around, but people suffering from them. In 1935, Alcoholics Anonymous was founded in Akron, Ohio. In 1953, Narcotics Anonymous in Los Angeles, California. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act would be implemented in 1938 as an attempt to regulate these chemicals and differentiate them from the other categories, but they did not retroactively approve existing drugs. In a rebuttal, manufacturers began to toe the line between them in an effort to circumvent these regulations. By skirting the line of being potentially food or cosmetic items, then drugs can land their way onto a store shelf without any approval or testing for adverse effects. Typically, even if they have the effects of a drug, they can remove liability through the warning labels. Things like K2 made it to the store shelves in 2008 by labeling themselves as a spice and contained some of the chemicals that were found in marijuana in arbitrary concentrations. Within 2 years, the USDEA would use emergency powers to control these substances. The chemicals in K2 were banned nationwide in 2012. In 1987, the future of drug manufacturing would be invented. CRISPR technology is the synthesis of man-made bacteria that can enter the body and actively manipulate things at a genetic level. On top of the revolving door of endless painkillers and other chemically imbalancing drugs, there seemed to be no way to stop this Pandora's box we have opened. So what do? Well, when you have a federal government fundraising for a privately patented drug, there seems to be a huge imbalance in how these things actually help the US. Just another industry pushing profits to the limits on the life or death of the public. Since the US is a debt-based culture, the hospitals have no issue treating you and then taking claim to either your personal belongings or your future income. Bankruptcy or indentured servitude are the results of these interactions for a lot of people. There is no other choice for someone with the will to live. We need politicians that endorse a public healthcare system that circumvents these antiquated patent laws and produces medical products and drugs at cost for real insurance to our life. Awareness of the drugs and their potential pros and cons is something we need to acknowledge with a lot of facets of life. Thanks for watching.